Good morning, Falcons. We're learning about a new set of instruments that you can learn to play here in band at Soulsbyville when you get to 5th grade. And they're all right behind me because today's lesson is on percussion. And it's a little different. We don't learn just one instrument, we learn a lot of different instruments. So why don't we take a look over here at the different instruments that you could play. When most people think percussion, they're thinking a drum set. That's our bass drum, hi-hat, which is two cymbals on top of each other. You can play it like that or close it with the foot pedal, or the snare drum, and the snare drum, I should say, are the three basics of having a drum set. Snare drum, hi-hat, and bass drum. And then you can get all kinds of extra drums that are on top of this, or extra cymbals, and it can get as complicated as you want. But the Soulsbyville band and most school bands are what are called concert bands, where it's winds and drums playing together, winds and percussion. And most of the time it is not drum set. We'll play a couple pep tunes, that's like when you guys come in for assemblies, it might call for a drum set, but for the most part concert bands don't really use drum sets. They use concert percussion. So here at Soulsbyville, if you choose percussion, we're not really going to play a lot of drum set. That's more of a 7th and 8th grade year. You might get one or two songs that play drum set, but for the most part, we're playing some concert percussion. And why don't we take a look over here behind me is what concert percussion is. This is more what you'd be playing if you chose percussion. I want to say it again. If you're wanting to play drum set, you probably don't want to choose percussion here. We're not really going to be playing that very much, except maybe a couple songs your 7th and 8th grade year. If you keep going with it, high school there's jazz bands where the percussion is just drum set. If you're wanting to play just drum set, I think you're looking for more of a rock band or a jazz band or something like that. But if you want to play concert percussion, like we're about to look at, then percussion might be the choice you want to make in 5th grade. Now, percussion includes two categories of percussion instruments. There's unpitched percussion and pitched percussion. Pitched percussion includes things like pianos or xylophones or marimbas, where it plays different pitches, just like our brass instruments. You can play a bunch of different notes on it. So marimbas, xylophones, pianos, among other things, are called pitched percussion. And unpitched percussion includes drums, cymbals, and even cowbells and tambourines. These instruments do not make different notes, or what we'd call pitches. Like on the brass instruments, we can play different notes up and down the scale. These play one tone. You can play different parts of it. Say, this part of the cowbell may not make the same sound as the bottom part of the cowbell, but it's not meant to play specific notes like maybe a piano would. That would be pitched percussion. Unpitched percussion are usually drums and cymbals or stuff that's meant to make one sound instead. Now, percussionists concert percussionists are supposed to know how to play any of these instruments, and in one song they may switch between 3, 4, or more of these instruments. So you might be playing cowbell for the first half of the song with a drumstick, and then you have to move over to the bass drum, and then you have to move over and play a piano. Percussionists have to learn a bunch of different instruments as opposed to brass, or next class would be woodwinds, where you're learning one instrument like a saxophone or a trumpet or a tuba. You're learning one instrument. Percussion, you have to learn a lot of different ones. It's the strangest of the choices of 5th grade band instruments. And if you're wanting to get really good at one instrument, you probably don't want to choose percussion because you're going to be learning a bunch of different instruments. Let's look at a professional percussionist, concert percussionist, I should say. You can see this giant orchestra. And we're going to have our percussionist switching between a bunch of pitched and unpitched percussion. Because in the percussion world, if you look back here too, these percussionists, they have to switch between a bunch of different instruments in a song. They don't just concentrate on one and get really good at one. They get good at playing a bunch of different percussion instruments, and that's what's expected. And if you join the Soulsbyville band on percussion, that's what will be expected of you. You'll be expected to play xylophones and marimbas. You'll also be expected to play bass drums and snare drums. I want you to remember, it's not just drum set. I get a lot of students that just want to play drum set. That is not what this is. Concert percussion is playing a bunch of different percussion instruments. And let's see her play. I bet you can tell how much fun this is. She moved from her her pitched percussion, which is these mallet instruments, and then she moved over here to the unpitched percussion and moved back and forth flawlessly. As a concert percussionist, if you choose percussion here at Soulsbyville, you'll be expected to play any of these. One song you might be playing these, one song you might be playing these, and one song you might be playing both. You got to jump back and forth between them. Why don't we take a closer look at unpitched percussion instruments? Very typical songs here at Soulsbyville that we'll play in 6th through 8th grade band would call for these 3 unpitched percussion instruments. The bass drum, which is our biggest one. Remember, big means low, so if I take the bass drum mallet and play it, it's a very low instrument. Our bass drum. Bass means low, so your lowest voices are usually called a bass instrument. Our snare drum, which we talked about in the previous lesson, sounds like this. And it has those little snares on bottom, those long they almost look like stretched out slinkies or stretched out coils that make that sound. Now if I loosen up the snares so they're off, it sounds like this instead. It sounds like a normal drum. So it's really a normal drum with those stretched out snares on bottom. And finally, we will usually have a cymbal here. And cymbals can be played 2 ways. You can play it with drumsticks, or really hard. You want to make it crash. Or a lot of the times it'll call for these mallets that we typically use on our unpitched percussion, like xylophones. And then, tell me if you've ever heard this before. This happens a lot in classical music and in movie music. Sounds like this. Right before a big climax of a piece, a big loud moment, we have percussionists doing this. Those are 3 really typical unpitched percussion that you'd play on a typical Soulsbyville song. 6th through 8th grade song, these 3. And as we get older, we also start to add more and more percussion instruments. Some other typical ones would be, I already showed you, tambourine. Happens to get called for in a lot of songs. It'll call for these 3 instruments, but it might call for somebody playing tambourine. Might also call for the cowbell that I showed you earlier, which we play with the drumstick. But I bet you can name way more drums and unpitched percussion than this, because percussion's anything you hit. So I think you can imagine a lot more. And we do have a lot more of those. I'm just showing you what would be typical stuff if you were to pick percussion and you get to 6th grade, we start playing these songs that I'd pull out Soulsbyville. Typical, these 3, cowbell, tambourine, are unpitched percussion that get used a lot. And you can expect to play them if you choose percussion as your instrument in 5th grade. Next, I have an unpitched percussion ensemble that you can take a look at, the SO Percussion. They're going to play the song Springs. That was composed by Paul Lansky. And you're going to notice everybody in here is playing unpitched percussion. Marching band's another big part of playing here at Soulsbyville, and we have marching unpitched percussion like this quad. These are called quad toms, and if you see, it's on a big old harness right here, and you march with it. It's like marching with 4 different drums. So when we get to marching band, you're in 7th and 8th grade, you've had a few years of percussion under your belt. That's one of the things you can play. That's called a quad. We also have snare drums, just like what we saw earlier, but it comes on a harness, just like this. Another unpitched percussion because it plays one note. We can also play the rim like that. Very fun to play on a harness just like that. And finally, we also have another unpitched percussion. You're probably looking a little familiar because it's a bass drum. Except we wear it up like this, we look like the Energizer Bunny, right? We have 2 mallets, so we can play. And these get played during the marching season, which is around in May. You get to play at the Motherload Parade, you get to play at Grandparents' Day, and the Rick Restivo Band Review as well. Whole band gets to go, including all the brass and the winds, but when it's marching band time for percussion, we get to pull out some of these harness unpitched percussion. I bet you want to see some professionals playing. All right, here we go. We got the Blue Devils. They're a professional drum corps. They're in their semifinals right here in 2019. Let's take a look at the Blue Devils drum line. It's awesome to see the pros do it. These guys are so talented. Well, now let's talk pitched percussion that you would play here at Soulsbyville. Pitched percussion can play a bunch of different notes. Say, I've got my marimba right here. I have my mallets that I showed you earlier. We used on similar ones on the cymbals. We'll use these mallets and we can play different notes. We're not limited to just one that we are on unpitched percussion. Not that pitched percussion is better than unpitched percussion, that's just how it's different. It has a bunch of different notes to play, up and down. And we also have our xylophone right here. It's the smaller version. Let me grab some mallets. It also has wood keys on there. And because of that, it's a little smaller. It sounds different, right? It's a little higher. And we have different mallets to use on it. These are rubber, which are a little harder. And it sounds a little different. Xylophone, marimba are the ones that stay at school. In fact, everything you've seen before stays at school. You don't buy or rent or borrow any of these instruments from school. They stay here. Instead, you get smaller versions of the instruments to take home if you choose to play percussion. That would be right here. An even smaller version, this thing is called the Glockenspiel. It's a funny name because it's a German name. And the Glockenspiel usually would be on a stand, just like these. But all mine are checked out to percussion students, so I don't have any to show you guys today, but I do have the marching one. That looks like this. And if you were to play Glockenspiel in marching band, you'd wear it just like this, and you can play like that. Just like that. It's metal instead of wood, and it goes home with you. This is what you practice at home. Not this one on the harness, but one that comes free of the harness, because you want to take this thing home. It comes in a case and all that. So unpitched percussion looks like this. The Glockenspiel, the xylophone, and the marimba, which you'd play very regularly in the Soulsbyville band, just as much as your unpitched percussion like snare drum, bass drum, and all those. So one more thing that also counts as an unpitched percussion is a piano, which we learn in 4th grade. But the piano rarely gets called for in any of our songs that I will pull up. Every once in a while it might call for the piano, but luckily, you may have noticed, these xylophones, or marimba, glockenspiel, they all play the same, and they are exactly the same as a piano. The bottom row is the white keys on a piano, and the top row is the black keys. So if you learn how to play this, you learn how to play piano, and vice versa. If you learn how to play the piano, you learn how to play these. The difference is, instead of pushing keys like on piano, you hit it, because percussion, we hit the notes. And you can learn all kinds of fun things on these. Unpitched percussion, marimba, xylophone, glockenspiel with the metal keys, you would expect to play in the Soulsbyville band if you chose percussion. All right, let's see another pro. Another word we might use for this unpitched percussion is mallets. Mallets are those xylophones, marimbas, glockenspiel that I just showed you. It's also called pitched percussion. This is a professional in this. His name is Emmanuel Sejourne. He's playing Attraction. Apparently it's a short version. Oh, I'm sorry. The composer is Emmanuel Sejourne. Wrote Attraction. That's the short version, but it's performed by Christoph Seitzen. Let's take a look. Wow, wow, wow. Incredibly impressive. Super fun. That's our mallet instruments. Remember, mallets are those that we hit, and they're pitched percussion. But I have one more thing to show you. Now, I've been teaching 9 years now. And what I've found is that students that are successful always have one thing in common. And that is that they go home and they practice. And they go home and play. Those students that come into band and never practice at home, the only time they play their instrument is in class, usually end up getting frustrated and quitting because it gets very hard. All their friends start passing them up and how well they can play, and they feel like they're just not good at music when the whole time it was just they never practiced at home. Practicing at home every day makes band incredibly fun. Have you ever gotten really good at something? Well, it's because you did it a lot until you got really good at that. It's the same here, but what you're probably wondering right now is, how am I supposed to take the marimba home? Or how am I supposed to take that bass drum home? Well, you don't. If you end up playing percussion here at Soulsbyville, instead you take home what's called a bell kit. And a bell kit includes your glockenspiel, which doesn't come on this harness. Remember, it's just the mallet part. And it comes with a practice pad, which is meant to mimic, it feels just like playing a snare drum. So when I hit a drumstick on it, it feels just like it. It has the same bounce back, has the same drum head as it, so you can practice it without it being really heavy or really bulky. It's not hard to carry around this. Look how small it is. You can play it anywhere. I remember on band trips in high school, our percussionists would be on the bus practicing on the way to our band competitions and everything on these. It's practice pads, feel just like a drum. They're smaller, they're not loud, so you can play without bothering everybody else. And they're great for playing or practicing all your unpitched percussion parts on this, and you can learn your pitched percussion parts on this. Because remember, this is the same as that right back there. That one's just bigger, has more keys, but otherwise it plays exactly the same. So we have our bell kit that we transport home, our practice pad, which we practice our unpitched, and our bells or glockenspiel, which we practice our pitched percussion. Guys, that's it for percussion. It's a lot of different instruments that's owned by the school that you don't get to take home, but you get to play at school, and you have your practicing instruments that I just showed you. The bell kit, the practice pad, and the glockenspiel that you can play at home. And that's what you practice at home every day in order to get very good at your instrument. One last thing. Why don't we see all these instruments together like we did at the very beginning, where we had our solo percussionists playing all the different ones? Well, let's see what unpitched and pitched percussion sounds like when they play together.
students. I will see you next week. We're going to see some woodwinds because we did our brass lesson. We just did percussion. We learned about unpitched and pitched percussion, which you're expected to play all these percussion instruments. If you choose percussion here at Soulsbyville, we learn all the percussion because that's what's expected. We play a little of everything. And next week we'll look at woodwinds like flutes, clarinets, saxophones, and a couple extra ones that I'm going to throw in for the, if you get to 7th and 8th grade, you want to play something a little different. So, see you for the next one, which will be woodwinds. Have a good day.